All right, hello again. Another video here for you about the Noble Ridge Chardonnay. This has been on the list for a little bit. I kind of put it on the list at the end of last summer, and it did pretty well for a couple months during the summer months. And it's kind of tailed off through the winter, as a lot of our white wines have. But as we get into the spring, I want to kind of bring it back into your attention and give you a little bit of understanding of what kind of a Chardonnay this is, as well as talk a little bit about Chardonnay in general. Noble Ridge, we've got two of their wines. We've got their Meritage, which is a blend of Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, and I think a couple of other things, but think of it as a Bordeaux-style blend from the Okanagan. We also have this wine, their Chardonnay, called the Stony Knoll. This bottle is the 2018, but we're going to be switching over to the 2019s pretty soon. Great little bottle of wine. Not an expensive glass of wine. I think it's $13 a glass. It is local, it is fresh, it is vibrant. There's no reason this shouldn't sell in quantity. Every time I sell it to a table that wants something, cost efficient or good value, and also want it to kind of work with the menu and be pairing well with our seafood dishes, and this is a great recommendation for that purpose. Keep in mind, Chardonnay is a very versatile grape. Chardonnay is used in many different styles of wine. If you look at just France, you kind of see Chardonnay a little bit everywhere. You certainly see it in Champagne, so making sparkling wines. It's blended with Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier to produce the classic profile of Champagne. Chardonnay really contributes a lot of acidity and kind of leanness in that situation. You can always think of Chardonnay as being a fairly high acid grape. It does lose a little bit of acidity in some of its sort of warmer climate representations, like maybe in like a really big Napa Chardonnay, It's going to be losing a little bit of that acidity, but it's never going to be low, and medium would be a surprise. It's always going to be medium plus or high for the most part. You also see Chardonnay in Burgundy. You see it in the north of Burgundy in Chablis, where it finds its classic unoaked expression and typically a profile, or at least traditionally a profile, of green apple, lemon, lime, and lots of minerality. That is beginning to change in Chablis due to global warming, and you start seeing a little bit more stone fruits and a little bit more sort of melon kind of entering the equation, and the wines tend to get a little bit bigger. They're no longer sort of fully light-bodied wines. They're a little bit more medium-bodied. But that's Chablis for you. It's 100% unoaked Chardonnay. It is also found in the Côte de Beaune, primarily in Burgundy, which is a little bit further south of Chablis if you look at a map, where you're starting to see it's a little bit more decadent, oaked expression. You're definitely starting to see, lots of new oak entering the equation down there. Minerality is still there, and that's where Chardonnay kind of finds its most expensive and its most famous expressions in the vineyards of Montrachet, for instance. Very, very famous vineyard down there in the Côte de Beaune. And then you kind of see it, in smatterings elsewhere in France. So my point here is that Chardonnay is super versatile. Winemakers can do with Chardonnay what they please, assuming that the vineyards will allow it. Okay, so you can make a clean, crisp, refreshing style. You can make a big, rich, decadent, extravagant style of Chardonnay, and you can do everything in between. This is one of the styles that I would say is a little bit more on the in-between side. Okay, it is an unoaked Chardonnay. It doesn't say it on the front, but if you take a look at the back, it says 100% Chardonnay, dry, hint of oak, and then it gives you a bunch of suggestions to pair with it, which are basically seafoods. This wine is, they say a hint of oak. It is not, has 6% of the wine is aged in oak, okay? So we're not looking at a lot of oak influence here. Really what the oak here is contributing is a texture. Oak does two things in wine, primarily. It does the first thing, which is just contribute flavors of wood, okay? So oak has a certain flavor characteristic. It contributes a compound like vanillin. So vanillin is the compound that makes the flavor and aroma of vanilla. So that's why people will say that oaky wines kind of taste and smell like vanilla, because they do. It contributes a toastiness as well. When you're making the barrel, you've got to heat up the staves that form the shape of the barrel in order to get the wood to bend without breaking. If you heat it up a little bit, you don't get a whole lot of toastiness because you're not toasting the wood very much. You're maybe just contributing a little bit. if you do what you see in bourbon, where they actually char the inside of it, then you get lots of like smoky kind of burnt wood, forest kind of fire aromas. And then everything in between, you can toast it in varying amounts, and that'll contribute different flavors as well. But for the most part, the flavors you're looking at from wood are just, everything from cedar and sandalwood to vanilla and baking spices, sometimes cloves, and definitely kind of sometimes a smokiness depending on how much that toasting is being done in the cooperage where the barrels are being made. This has very little of that flavor influence, but the second thing that oak barrels do, is that they're watertight, but they're not airtight. So they actually let a little bit of air into the wine, very small and controlled quantities. What this does is it just takes the edge off the wine. Okay, it just smooths out some of the corners, so the wine doesn't seem quite as angular and harsh. It just softens it up a little bit, okay, and releases just a little bit of that tension. So that is what the oak is doing in this situation. Just that little bit of oak influence is just enough to sort of round the corners of that sort of tactile, textural experience in your mouth, and make the wine a little bit more supple, and a little bit more kind of chuggable, to be quite honest. So think of this wine as exactly that. It's just a nice rounded, fresh, unoaked style of Chardonnay that gives a nice kind of pear and maybe a little bit of peach and nectarine, but really it's lots of red apple, pear, and a little bit of minerality. Okay, it's not super complex, but it's not meant to be. It's just meant to be enjoyable. It's got nice flavor. It's really nicely balanced. It's got good concentration, and it's actually a little bit surprisingly aromatic for a Chardonnay. I wouldn't call this like aromatic in the sense of like Riesling or Muscat, but it does have a little bit more aroma than unoaked Chardonnay typically has. I suspect that this is because it's probably a biotype of Chardonnay called Chardonnay Muscat, which is a little bit more of an aromatic style, which you see a little bit elsewhere in the world. It's not super common, but it exists, and this might have a little bit of that in it. What this wine is going to pair well with is lots of different things. So I like to, at the cheaper end of the by the glass selection, I like those wines to be a little bit more on the versatile side, so they can kind of go with everything, right? Sometimes people just get a little bit shy around our prices, and then they want to save a little bit of money on wine, and they still want something good, and they kind of, want something that's going to work well with an assortment of dishes, which is probably what they're ordering if you're sharing or whatever. I kind of want those wines at the lower end of the price point to be versatile, and that's kind of exactly what this is. At $13, it's going to go well with the seafood tower. It's going to go reasonably well. That wouldn't be my preferred pairing, but it's going to work with the seafood linguine. It's going to work with the tuna tonnato. It's going to work with. It's going to be fine with the curry cauliflower. It's going to work with all of these different things. It's not going to work with things like a steak or wagyu, but you know what? There's no one wine in the world that's going to work with all of that stuff. So this is just a great table wine. This and the Kuhn Crianza, which I'm also going to do a video about, are kind of the wines that I would say are great party wines or great table wines. You just put them in the middle of the table. Everyone's going to like them. They're not going to screw up any of the other dishes that are on the table for the most part. And they're just the right price point for that. They're super quaffable. So don't hesitate to sell this. If somebody's kind of stuttering and stumbling in between a couple different options, they got the Pinot Grigio, they got the Hatch Bianco, and they got this to choose from. I'd probably push them towards this. I think it's the better option for just a versatile, easy drinking wine that everyone can share in the middle of the table. Okay, ask for a taster the next time you come into work. Again, with all of these wines, you kind of have to know what I'm talking about, and the only way to do that is to taste them. So check it out. Do a paid in for a bottle in the summer. It's delicious. You won't regret it. And yeah.